For security reasons, baggage left unattended will be removed and destroyed.
Welcome to Along the Lanes. It's been a few weeks since I last recorded. I was in Canada and I thought while I was there I'd continue filming and I'd continue putting up some videos. And for the first few nights I found myself laying awake at night thinking, when would I find a quiet place to film for a little bit? Or when would I find the time to sit down and do my editing and, upload everything, because it takes a little bit of time. And in the end, decided to go with the Zen option, and I would just enjoy being there. I would do as much filming as I could, and then I'd come back and I'd share all of the good stuff with you. October was a really good month. There was so much cool stuff going on in the craft world. So first it was Slow Fashion October, which is intended to be a month where you focus on making your own wardrobe or on mending what you have. Basically, concentrating on making or possibly buying items that will last, that will be part of your wardrobe for a long time. So a lot of people made some amazing jumpers that really look like heirlooms that would be passed on generations, or fixing and mending the elbows of their favourite jumpers rather than just throwing them out. And that all happened in October. Instagram was filled with some truly amazing photos. The Americans had the wonderful, wonderful Rhinebeck. If you're not familiar with it, it's a big wool and fibre event in New Jersey or in New York. And really, again, there's a lot of people who make it an objective to make their Rhinebeck sweater, which I've mentioned before. There's a book by Ysolda Teague that gathers about a dozen designers, really beautiful cardigans or pullovers that were made with Rhinebeck in mind, so that lovely October crisp autumnal feel. October was also the month of Back to the Future. So Marty McFly came to 2015 and he came to October. But I suppose instead I got the absolutely beautiful Canadian autumn that I tried to capture on video for you. And I got loads of family time. It was great. It was almost unbelievable that all three of my sisters were around all at the same time. We tend to travel a lot or live abroad a lot. There's one who lives, or two who live in Canada full time. One who's been flying around, who spent a few years in Spain, who spent some time in Paris, in Brussels, and now she's just shot off to New Zealand for the year. So it was a really good opportunity to have the whole family together. It was just really brilliant. And there was also Poutine Fest. I'll tell you more about that later. So first I'll fill you in on the knitting projects I've been working on the lovely stash enhancements I've got, and then we'll warp over to Canada and I'll show you a little bit of my home. You may not believe it, but I actually didn't go to any yarn shops while I was in Ottawa. There are some really lovely yarn shops there and I've done the rounds a few times, and maybe next time I'll take you with me. But I figured there's enough stash and there's just so much to do that it wasn't my first choice of activity. However, I did get a little bit of stash enhancement anyway. So here goes. Just very simple. Got some Red Heart, sock yarn, 2 balls. That was while I was at Walmart actually. So I was doing grocery shopping with Mum and I decided that these colours just had to be a pair of socks for me. The other thing that I got while I was there I got some beads. Really lovely tealy green, which will accompany a new shawl that I've started, which I'll show you in a little bit. So these are just pretty standard, not quite sure how you describe sizes for beads, but it's the 6-0, which is kind of seemingly the most common size of beads for knitted projects. They're fairly big, so I can do the method where you use a crochet hook, very, very, very tiny crochet hook, and you pass it that way rather than put them straight on the yarn before you start, which seems like a pretty laborious way to do it, which I've never done. So crochet it is for me. Then this was slightly heartbreaking. I went to a shop called Fabricland, which I remember when we were young, we'd often go with Mum and she'd pick some fabric to make us some dresses. And I knew that the branch nearest to my parents had closed a few years back, with the vague promise that they were rebuilding and that there would be a new shop there. Unfortunately, it's been a few years and I don't think anything's happened. And then the second shop that's closer to Ottawa was also closing, so we went there. It was a bit bittersweet, but I managed to find some more lovely beads. Can you tell I'm getting into the mood for a few projects with beads? Probably a few nice lacy shawls with beads. Something by Boo Knits, maybe. What else did I get? I've also been in the mood for painting and other crafts. I'm not quite sure what I fancy making yet, but I got a few stencils as well. This one is a lovely tree stencil with a bird in, and this one's just a repeated pattern. So I'm looking forward to playing around and seeing what I can do. Maybe I'll have something to show next week. I don't know. And while I was away, of course, the post kept coming, so some lovely hedgehog fibre club yarn has arrived. I'm not sure if I can show you. It might be a little bit too early because it's a club yarn, therefore it's secret for members until they actually receive it. Since I don't want to be a spoil sport, I'll post the pictures in the Along the Lines Ravelry group, so pop on over and you can see the photos without me spoiling it for the rest of the Hedgehog Fibres members. And since I got back, keeping in the mood of painting and making stuff that's not necessarily fibre crafts. Whoops. I was going through my mum's absolutely amazing art studio, and I found inspiration in these really cool texture stamps. So these ones have postmark stamps as though it comes from a city in the world, as well as some textures. And I'm just looking forward to using these either on clay, so something like on Fimo, or stamped on painting, possibly to use with making resin jewellery. Should be quite fun, a bit mixed media. Having a look around my mum's studio is always incredibly inspiring. She's got years and years of wonderful art stuff gathered there, and what she makes is just so lovely and so cheerful and so much fun to look at. There's just so many layers to it. And as part of that little splurge order, I also got a mould which I'll be using with resin jewellery. So that's to make buttons. And I've never used such a shallow mould, so it'll be quite interesting seeing how that comes out. But I think I'll try and make my own resin buttons to match my next cardigan project. So rather than buy buttons, I'll make my own. Let's hope it goes well. I'll keep you informed. So these bits came from the Craft Seller, which is a website here in the UK, and she was very kind to send me little other bits. So this one is a Fimo Air, so rather than the usual Fimo that you put in the oven and you bake to cure, this one is just an air dry one. So I'm looking forward to giving that a go and seeing how it turns out. And finally, the much lusted after Pom Pom magazine for this quarter has arrived. It's very wintry and cozy, big thick knits. I think I've already got a couple of things, the socks and probably the Wilding top, which is one of those shoulderless tops. I might actually use the glitter yarn that I picked up during the yarn crawl. I think that would look really festive and really sparkly and lovely. And finally, last stash acquisition. This one actually predates leaving for my trip to Canada, but I hadn't recorded since, so I'm a bit excited about the latest issue of The Knitter because they actually mentioned me. So they mentioned my yarn crawl video, so whoever at The Knitter decided to include me, thank you. You made my day, my week, my month. If you haven't seen the yarn crawl, I'll include a link. It's mentioned on page 15 of the Knitter magazine in the little sidebar Stitches on Screen. So, pretty chuffed. So I lied, it wasn't quite the last thing on my stash acquisitions. My little sister, who was going to New Zealand, was doing an absolute gutting of her old university, her old school stuff, all of the bits that you acquire and you put in boxes. She wanted to have a good clear through, and one of the things she gave me was a ton of old city maps. And by old I mean, you know, the past 10 years, I don't mean antiques. But they're maps that either mean a lot to her or are just interesting ones. And what I'm hoping to do is chop up some of those and include them either in some mixed media projects or again in resin jewellery. It's just nice to have a variety of textures and materials that I can use, so it'll go in my growing stash of papers and interesting mixed media stuff. I mentioned on Instagram that I was going through a stash of my old photos, of my childhood photos, which is what tends to happen when I go to Canada. We talk about old family holidays, we talk about old pets, we talk about family members, and I just end up digging out the old photo box and adding a few that either mum gives me, or in this case my sister, de-stashing a lot of her old stuff. So I said on Instagram that if I found a few that I didn't mind sharing that weren't too bad, I would share them. So if you pop over to Instagram, I've included a few, which include when I was very little with my sister, my first summer job working on a steam train, which was just the coolest job ever, and finally my last show in high school. We did Carmen by Bizet, and I was the toreador, so I had a sword, oh yeah. And looking at these pictures also reminded me of a question that somebody's asked a few weeks ago. I'm not sure if it was in the Ravelry group or if it was in private. By the way, thank you to all the people who've sent me really lovely little notes while I was away saying, hope you're okay. I didn't even think when I said I'd be posting in a few weeks that anyone would think that there was anything wrong. So nothing was wrong, everything was well. I was just lacking time to put together videos. So one of the questions was, who inspires you? And one of these people, unquestionably, and I think it's a good time to talk about it because today would have been his birthday, it may sound cliche, but one of the people who inspires me the most is my grandfather. So I worked my first summer job with my grandpa. We were both tour guides on a steam train in Ottawa, which is where I grew up. So we were both tour guides in French and in English. We would give our tour and tell people about the region, show them what was going on out the window. We had some really awesome musicians who'd play some great kind of folk songs during the trip. And I still have such fond memories of working with him. He was just such a kind man. And, you know, he'd cross the city to go and help anyone. He knew everyone. He was really welcoming and friendly. And he'd often come for breakfast to our house, even though he didn't live that close. And he would do things like hiding a box of Smarties under my pillow and making a knot in my pajamas. So it kind of started a bit of a pajamas war, where every time we'd go to his house, we'd make knots in his pajamas. And thinking back, that was so bad. But one day I went into his room, didn't find any pajamas, so I went into his cupboard and I found a couple of his silk ties and I made knots in those instead. I didn't quite get told off, but now with hindsight I realise how it might not have been the funniest thing to do. But hey, when you're a kid, you get away with it. And now for my finished objects and my works in progress. So this is a finished object. Yes, you have seen this one before. So this is my own leaving cowl. I made an identical twin for my sister using the other skein of the exact same Skein Queen Desire yarn, which is a really lovely woolly DK. I made her twin and I left it with her in Canada. She gets chilly a lot, so it was nice to give her something warm and cozy. I think she enjoyed it, and I loved the fact that a few people noticed that we were wearing exactly the same one. Aside from that, I have started a Ishbel, which is a Ysolda Teague pattern, and I am making it in one of the absolutely awesome Hedgehog Fibers yarns. So I am about halfway-ish through the lace, and currently it looks a little bit garish because it's I'm using a, would you call this speckled, or is speckled usually even shorter little dibs of colour? I'm not sure. I'll call it speckled for now. So I'm using one of the club yarns from last month, and as I said, I'm about halfway through, and I will be adding towards the end these teal beads in the, I think it's the last section of the pattern. So the last chart is perfect for lining up some lovely beads. So I'm really looking forward to getting to that. I haven't done beads in a couple of years probably. So it's not something that I've done so much that I'm bored of it, but it's also not something I've done so much that I'm very competent at it. So I'll be giving you updates on this very soon when I start the beaded section. So it's pretty good progress. I'm happy with how much I've done, considering that I made the whole leaving cowl as well while I was there. I'm also making some progress on my Gemini, which is the top that I'm making out of Easy Knits yarn. I have now separated the arms and I'm going down the body. I've decided to do it exactly as the pattern says, which I hope I won't regret, but is without shaping. So I'm not doing waist shaping, I'm not going in and then going out. I'm just doing it straight down, and then I believe there's a few increases towards the bottom just to fit around my big hips. So it's now getting to the stage where it's going to be fairly easy going, just keep going round and round and round until I hit about 14.5 inches, I think. So I've still got a little while to go. Great TV watching, knitting. I'm using 2 balls because it's not exactly dyed the same from skein to skein, which is what you get with hand dyed. So by swapping around, there's less likelihood of pooling, even though these aren't really dense enough, intense enough colours to get that much pooling. But it's still nice. By swapping around, I should get a slightly more even effect as I change from one ball to the other. So I'm still on the first 2 balls, and I've bought 5. I suspect I might have overbought. Well, make great hats and mittens and things with whatever's left. Can't remember if I've ever shown you this bag. So this is a bag that I made a few years ago, back when I did more sewing, and in fact that might even be from before I started knitting. Really love this little adorable bag. I really do have a thing for slightly childish fabrics, and I think I might fancy getting back into sewing a little. I've seen a few incredibly cute dresses on Pinterest or on Instagram maybe, and I've bookmarked them, and I'll be going through my fabric stash. Yeah, I have a fabric stash too. And working out if I have the right fabric for it, and then I might give it a go. Now, what I think is my last work in progress, probably, is a hat that I've started. So I've really only done the brim, and last night I started the first couple of rows of colour work. So this is the Vitsippa, which is also from an older issue, I think from issue 12 of Pom Pom magazine. So I fancied doing a little bit of colour work, and I'm using yarn that I spun a few years ago. Originally I was planning on making the Karusellen hat, which has really adorable little horses along the edge, another more recent Pom Pom one. But that requires worsted weight, and as I started handballing the first colour, I realised that actually I'd spun this a lot more fingering weight. They're not quite even. This is probably more DK-ish, this is more fingering weight, but hey, I'll use them together and see how it goes. But yeah, I couldn't do a worsted weight project because it would have been just not quite the right chunkiness. So I've picked another colour work, which is a truly lovely one, but it's a lot slower going. So rather than being halfway done the hat in 2 nights, I'm just about starting the colour work. So it's slower going, but it'll be nice and cozy. It won't be quite as hot as a hat, and I'm enjoying working with handspun. It's I do have a reasonable stash of handspun, and I haven't been using it very much, so I think it's time to just have faith in my own spinning and start using it. In fact, maybe next week I'll take you on a tour of my stash. So I've never really introduced you to the different sections and how I've kind of organised-ish everything. So I'll show you next week. Today I'm in Ottawa and we're here for Poutine Fest, and I can't believe it. A few days ago it was 21 degrees and it's currently snowing. So behind me you can see the Parliament Hill and the flame, and just down this way is where Spark Street is, where Poutine Fest is happening. For those who aren't familiar with it, poutine is a Canadian dish, and it's a dish composed of fries and cheese curds and gravy. And obviously Poutine Fest means that you get to try all sorts of really wild and wonderful poutine variations from various chip stands. So it's the first time I come here. My family have done it a few times and I thought I'd come and try it. So let's see what we can find in the snow.
Very quiet.
Well, we demolished that one pretty quickly.
Wow.
crispy chicken, and
So what did we pick again?
I have a bacon double cheeseburger,
And you're treating us to crispy corn.
and we have a
Crispy popcorn chicken.
crispy popcorn chicken and bacon.
And crispy bacon.
And
Yeah,
crispy bacon.
nice.
In my face.
It's
Is the all-in basically the whole lot jumped into? I'm starting to
Crispy bacon. Bacon double cheeseburger and
Oh my
popcorn
God.
chicken.
Burger, yeah.
I'm starting to think I'm not going to be able to.
Oh, no.
Another inspiration is a guy called Neistat. He is nowadays a daily vlogger, so he posts on YouTube absolutely every day, but previously has a background in filmmaking and in advertising. And I find it inspiring that he's completely bonkers, lives in New York, spends half his life on a skateboard zooming through traffic, and I think I like the thought that he doesn't mind being different or being a bit goofy or doing something completely mad just to really get his message across. And that reminds me that I should do my videos how I want them. I should do what I fancy, even if it's not necessarily the norm. Just do it, and there'll always be somebody somewhere who's mad enough to watch it too. One aspect where we definitely differ is he seems to sleep about 4 or 5 hours a night. Imagine doing video editing every single day. And he functions fine on 4 or 5 hours. If I don't get 7 hours, I go a bit loopy. I would highly suggest take a look in the show notes. I've included a link to his latest video, which was done in collaboration with another YouTuber. It's just such brilliant filmmaking where they've used a skateboard and a bit of decoration to essentially send Aladdin shooting through the streets of New York. Just brilliant. Go have a look. You'll love it. I think it's entrepreneurship and creativity that I find so fascinating in these people, whether it's my granddad and his willingness to help the whole world, or Casey's completely bonkers videos. So I'd love to hear who inspires you, who are your mentors or your examples that you like to follow. Leave a comment below and let me know. I'd love to hear. So that's it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to join us on the Ravelry Along the Lanes group, say hi on Twitter and on Instagram, and give the video a big like if you've enjoyed it, and I shall see you next week. Bye bye!